Chapter 5 begins with a detailed description of Munalynst and the indigenous race, the Muns. Mun history and culture is laid down before us, an entire race of bankers, lawyers, and financiers. I also like the reference to the Clone Wars micro-series, which depicts the devastation of Munalynst. Enter Darth Plagueis, or as he is known within his own crowd, Higo Damask, Magister of Damask Holdings. And on the topic of his own crowd, Plagueis and/or Damask surrounds himself with fellow bankers and financiers. He doesn't hang out with honey-tongued politicos. That's not who he is. Higo Damask is a banker, a moneymaker, an aggressive captain of industry. We also learn more about Darth Tenebrous in this chapter, or rather, the famed starship designer Rugus Gnome. Gnome is presumably a close friend and ally of many of these Muns, based on their comments of him, but the first thing they talk about now that he's dead is how to divvy up his assets. More reinforcement of the life is cheap notion. After some ruthless corporate planning with Larsh Hill, father of San Hill of Attack of the Clones fame, Plagueis leaves for his private estate on an island called Abora. There, he shows 114D his private library and his ongoing experiments, and essentially recruits the droid as his research and lab assistant. Dr. Frankenstein now has his Igor. Plagueis then reveals his ultimate goal, immortality. Let me say that the logistics of this feat are taken into account, and it's clear that it won't happen by magic, figuratively speaking, that is. Plagueis does some more musing over Sith history and more theorizing about midichlorians. In regards to the Force, Plagueis is a scientifically minded skeptic, and his attitudes are influenced accordingly. Finally, Plagueis isn't interested in spiritual immortality. He wants physical immortality, everlasting life. Chapter 6 is the Gathering on Sojourn, a sort of meet and greet between various galactic power brokers, where all the attendees descend into savagery and partake in every imaginable excess, all as a secret social experiment conducted by Plagueis. And to be perfectly honest, I can easily see something like this taking place in real life. Run away, Donald Trump is secretly a mad social scientist. Anywho, while all these guys are fucking and partying, Plagueis meets with Gardula the Hutt, whom we should all recognize as the former owner of Anakin Skywalker. Gardula has apparently pissed off a lot of the higher-ups in Hutt society, and wants to move the Tatooine to distance herself from them, and wants Plagueis' support in helping her turn Tatooine into the pod racing capital of the galaxy. Plagueis then meets with the Yinkori representatives, who are pissed off that their world hasn't been allowed to join the Republic. Oh yeah, and Yinkori are immune to Force-based mind tricks, and Plagueis nearly makes a fool of himself experimenting with this. Plagueis then meets with Pax's team of Malastare, who is trying to prevent Tatooine from becoming the pod racing capital of the universe because Malastare would lose all its business. Plagueis really doesn't care what team thinks and decides to prove to him that he's completely expendable, but this doesn't come up till later. Plagueis then meets with the Gossam heads of subtext mining, and uses some brutal intimidation tactics to make them spill their guts, and they give him the location of an underground plasma deposit on Naboo. The next day, there's an intruder in the forest outside Plagueis' fort on Sojourn, and Plagueis goes out to investigate. He is ambushed by Darth Venomous, a secret apprentice trained by Tenebrous to replace Plagueis. While Venomous turns out to be a surprisingly able fighter, Plagueis still makes short work of him. Venomous does bring to mind the primary flaw with the Rule of Two. It places the Sith in such a tenuous position at all times. With only two members, the death of either of them would be a major blow. And what if a master spends his entire life training an apprentice who is unfit for mastery? Or an apprentice can't attain mastery on his own, in which case they would require an insurance policy. And this is where individuals like Darth Venomous and Starkiller come in, to provide aid and/or replacement. Anywho, Plagueis makes Venomous consume a poisonous flower that puts him in a coma so he can experiment on him. And this takes us into Chapter 7. This chapter begins with Plagueis musing over Venomous's prone body, but soon becomes the autobiography of Higo Damask. Young Higo was born on the frozen world Megito to care Damask and his codicil partner, or secondary wife. Higo eventually discovered his ability to manipulate and control his fellow children and confided this to his parents, who revealed that they both had similar abilities. As Higo grew up, he eventually met his father's associate, Rugus Gnome. Higo was handed over by his parents to Gnome, who recruited him into the Sith. It's also revealed that the union between his parents had actually been arranged by Gnome in order to produce Higo. In short, Higo Damask was the product of eugenics, selective breeding to produce a powerful Force sensitive. Publicly, Higo Damask worked as Rugus Gnome's accountant. Secretly, Darth Plagueis worked as Darth Tenebrous' apprentice, and they traveled the galaxy, quietly encouraging anarchy. And now, Darth Plagueis worked as the ultimate puppet master, controlling the actions of a select few in order to influence the actions of trillions. Using data found aboard Venomous's ship, Plagueis started tracking down 3 Force sensitives that Venomous had scouted out as potential apprentices, an action that earns him Plagueis' grudging, though technically posthumous, respect. This hunt occupies the entirety of Chapter 8, and it is a hunt, as Plagueis views them as threats to be eliminated. The first is a Shy Ido shapeshifter who has been scamming casinos in the Tyon cluster with his Force abilities. Plagueis tracks him down and intimidates him, but surprisingly doesn't kill him. Kinda odd, but moving on. The second is an Iktatshi woman who has set herself up as a sort of prophetess on Seleucami, preaching archaic Sith ideals. Plagueis decides that her ideas are at cross purposes to his own, and therefore a threat to Sith domination, as she is encouraging utter selfishness rather than complete submission. Plagueis roasts her alive from the inside out with Force lightning right in front of all of her followers. The third is a Nautolan hoodlum with a history of sadomasochism who has been confined to a mental hospital on Bedlam. Nice name for a planet. Using information provided by the administrator of the mental hospital and a local news report, Plagueis tracks him to Abraxan, where he has taken to slaughtering Force-sensitive creatures in the local swamps. Plagueis tracks him down in the swamp and tricks him into confronting the 2 Jedi investigating his activities. He is killed.